In 3, 2, 1, action.
This is the story of a girl in a world where she looks so sad. Photographs, I absolutely love her when she smiles.
Welcome
Will
to
we
the
get
weekday.
stricken for that?
I don't know.
Copyright stricken?
I don't know that it actually had a tune behind it, so I think the robots are going to be fine.
Parody law comes into play.
Yeah, the DMCA. Mm-hmm. Welcome to episode 60-something of the weekday. Your source for the greatest late 90s and early 2000s hits.
Well, we're talking about this. We're talking about this past weekend?
Yeah, I think before the race.
Yeah, right
maybe?
before the race.
Which we'll get into in a minute.
Speaking of stupid things.
Yeah.
90s music.
Yeah, most of it.
Yeah.
Some
There's
stupider, 80 or 90s? 80s or 90s?
90s.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I would say 80s.
No.
Justin, stupider, 80s or 90s?
For music?
Yeah.
80s.
2 verse 1. Get out of here.
Nope. I think that like the arena rock of 1980s garbage. Throw that out.
I think most of the pop was too.
No, there's a lot of good. There's a lot because it's all like weird. People are discovering computers and synthesizers and doing weird stuff.
Yeah, but in the 90s they were discovering feelings. Like grunge.
Come on. No, people were discovering sadness. Oh, sadness. Oh, you can be sad and write a song. Wow, look at that.
Welcome to the weekday. This is episode 60-something. I'm Andy.
Go cry into your bag.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, right. Sorry. Hello. I'm Michael. Man.
And over there on the wheels of steel,
I'm Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
Hey.
Thanks for listening to us. Thanks for catching up with us. Thanks for doing whatever you're doing while you have us in your ears right now. If you're on YouTube, thanks so much. Do us a favor, if you're on YouTube watching this, hit the old thumbs up button or hit the old subscribe button. Either one of those or both of them.
Or the bell.
Well, I don't know. The bell doesn't actually matter as that much
it just
anymore.
notifies people. Yes, it does, because it's our, like, hey, come on, watch this.
Hey, Bay-Hope's got some stuff for you. Bing, 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 and it's going to pop up on your phone. No, it really does help what we're doing here. We've been seeing an increase up and to the right that way of all of our views and our likes and on all of our media and all of our podcasts and stuff. So thanks, everybody. Keep on doing what you're doing. Keep on sharing it. If you are watching this on Facebook, thanks so much as well. Like it. And if you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Overcast, on Stitcher, on Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, whatever you're listening to.
Oh my gosh, this is so long.
Thanks. Okay. Before we get into our actual topic today, because we have like a little bit of time left, we wanted to kick it to you. It's true. We only have a little time left. We wanted to kick it to you in the audience as well. And I want to ask you one question and one question only. Justin, my camera. What's the dumbest thing you've ever done?
Within reason. We went
legally.
Through,
what is the dumbest thing
you? We went through some things pre-show that
we were working some things out here, and I was airing. I have a lot of dirt and cruft underneath this sunny disposition that I carry with me all the time.
In your past life.
In a previous,
many of them illegal.
There was a lot of illicit activities.
We're talking strictly legal, stupid things.
Yeah,
here.
so
or legal adjacent.
Yeah, so before we get there, Justin, in 15 seconds, what's the dumbest thing you've ever done?
15 seconds. I was playing Manhunt and at night a while back, and I sliced my toe open.
I love this story.
On a rusty sewer grate.
Oh.
And I didn't know I did that until about
years later.
Maybe like 30 seconds to a minute later, when I'm like, why does my foot feel wet?
Oh!
And then I reached out, because it was super dark outside, so I reached down and feel my shoe.
Because Manhunt.
And I'm like, that's not my shoe. That's my foot that I feel right now.
And it's coming off. My foot is coming off.
My foot. Why am I holding my foot right now? No. But
I love this.
yes, that and no joke, actually happened. At that time, my friend was planning on becoming a doctor. He changed. I'm not even kidding. He changed his major after that. He was so pale. Pale.
Well, Justin, you at least did one good thing on that day.
You changed someone's life.
You changed the future of somebody, and gosh darn it, you are to be commended for that.
And really, I don't want a doctor who gets pale at the sight of my own blood.
Yeah, exactly. Mike Mage, What's the dumbest thing you've done in the last 3 days?
I mean, yeah, the whole reason we're talking about this is because Andy and I just got back from a weekend of every year we do this half marathon called the Donna. And
in Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah, and it's it's a benefit for breast cancer research, which our mom died from breast cancer, and so it's a great weekend to celebrate, remember our mom. It's bittersweet, mostly bitter because at the end of it we have to run 13 miles, and this year this was like one probably maybe outside of the first year. The very first time I did it, this might have been the hardest time
Mike,
that I've done it.
You looked so ragged at the end.
I was like, I don't know what it was.
Well, here's what it was, and let me paint you a vista real quick. There was a winter storm blowing through Jacksonville the weekend we were up there. Jacksonville's 3.5 hours away from Tampa, and so it's traditionally always a little bit colder there than it is here in January or February. But it was mid 40s, low.
Wet?
Yeah, low 50s, high 40s. There were 20-mile-an-hour sustained winds with up to 40 and 50-mile-an-hour gusts. Wow. It was raining. All weekend it was raining.
Yeah.
And it was that type of weather that blows through you.
Yeah.
It was that like northern wind that just has no regard for you or your personal well-being and just blows through you. And we ran a half marathon on that. Now, I had a decent time running the half marathon.
Yeah, but you're in much better shape than I am, so...
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yes, maybe.
No, the answer is not maybe.
I did run this morning.
Yes.
I ran this morning.
I love that.
I worked out
I love
yesterday.
that for you. I love that for you.
But I got to run it with my oldest, Austin,
Yeah.
which was great. And Mike started with us too. And then, I don't know, we all went out too hot. If you know the running lingo, we went out too hot. And we ran our first 5 miles way faster than we should have.
I was killing it. I'm seriously, my 5K time for a half marathon was like, it was in the 25s.
Yeah, you were doing good.
Dang, I'm killing
I'm
this.
a PR by like 10 minutes.
Yeah, but seriously, I was thinking that. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. But then I got to mile 10, and here's where the theme of today's banter comes in. I remember thinking to myself, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. The weird thing is like I always look down at like the 10K mark, so it's like the 6 mile mark. I look down at my watch and I go, oh man, we're doing great on time. And then we always get to mile like 11, and I look down and I go like, where did the time go? Yep. How did we get here?
Your miles literally go from I'm like 8:30 to like 9:30 a mile.
Well, yeah.
Not you, me. That's me thing. That happens for me.
Fortunately, we all got to finish, but it was. Again, part of that vista, it was rainy and cold, and then the gun went for go, and it stopped raining. And then literally Mike crossed under 2 hours later. Mike crossed the finish. So I crossed with my son, Austin, which was totally awesome. And we were there. We were in shorts, and it was raining, or it was windy and right on the beach, and it was nasty. We're running into headwinds that were almost pushing us back the entire time.
Because it was on the beach, it's just the wind is like swirling.
And it's blowing across you, and you're... And so Mike crosses the finish line. We walk over to give him a hug, and literally it starts raining right then. And then it rained the entire way back to the car. Yeah. And then I couldn't get warm the rest of the day. Mike couldn't eat the rest of the day.
Yeah, my stomach was in like really weird. Again, it's, every year it's one of the dumbest things that we do.
But we do it every year.
It's great. It's wonderful, but it's dumb.
Yep, absolutely. So throw in the comments below what's the dumbest thing you've ever done.
Within reason.
Yeah. We'd love to read those and respond and laugh at you / cry with you, but mostly laugh at you. Yeah. We're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to introduce the topic for the day. See you in a minute. Thank you so much for joining us here at Bay Hope TV, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on Facebook, or whether you're listening to us on any one of our podcast providers. And if you're interested in getting connected more with Bay Hope Church, you can head over to bayhope.com at any point, or look us up on our socials at Bay Hope Church. We would love to get the chance to talk with you, meet with you, connect with you, and engage with you. And we're back. I was gonna sing. Backstreet's Back. All right.
90s music.
Yeah, but I didn't want to. That would have really gotten us copyright infringed.
Thank God you just said it and you didn't sing it.
Right. Yeah. Backstreet's Back. All right.
Everyone knows it in their head.
Yeah.
You hear
Baby,
it.
bye, bye, bye. You want me to keep going?
Please.
No, we're good. sailing is gonna take.
Go. Let's go.
Yeah, I do. I have a meeting. So if you've been joining us the last couple of episodes, we've been in a series called "Is Church Dead?" And we've been hotly debating, and honestly, it has been a good conversation that we've been having, asking the question, is church dead? And then looking at facets of it. So the first episode, we talked about the actual worship music, quote unquote, scene. Is that contributing to the death of the church? And it's not. Spoiler. There is some things that need to be reformed, but
the appearance.
Yeah. The second week, we talked about the absence of self-care in a lot of church leaders and pastors, and why church leaders and pastors suck so much at taking care of themselves outside of the Messiah complex, and how that could be contributing to the fact that people are leaving the church in droves.
Yeah, including leadership.
Including leadership of all ages.
Or not even like developing people into be leaders in that. You know?
And that's a serious thing. And so we're watching the slow, what appears to be, again, the slow decline of the church. But we want to flip today on its head a little bit, and we actually want to talk about why the Western church might be dying, and why the way we are doing church might actually need to be, I don't want to say reformed, because that strikes up all sorts of images of like nailing theses to a door in the middle of the night. And
what was that?
Theses.
Theses.
Yes.
Okay.
Theses. A paper with a bunch of points on it.
Right. A thesis, if you will. The plural of thesis.
Right.
Yes.
So we wanted to have a conversation about that. We wanted to have a conversation about where the church needs to be reformed and how we can actually do that. Is that kind of tracking?
I love that.
So I just want to jump in real quick because obviously, given the topic, obviously we work at a church.
What?
So, yeah. So.
Great.
News.
Yeah, no, we're in a church.
Yeah.
We do work
Church
at a church.
building,
Yeah.
yes.
I had to look around for a second.
We are the church.
But yeah, so obviously, working at a church and stuff, should probably be careful about how we word everything.
Okay.
Because we're not bashing, we're not like trying to bash stuff or anything.
No. And Justin brings up a good point there. None of this entire series has been bashing the church. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And I hope that as you're listening to this or watching this, you're realizing that we're not being critical of the church, because there are enough podcasts and enough books and enough websites out there and Twitter handles that are just bashing the church with no sort of recourse.
Yeah.
Instead, we're looking and trying to diagnose some of the issues of why people are, particularly our age and younger, why they're leaving the church in droves, why it seems like our church is now back open, quote unquote, from the pandemic, and yet attendance levels are way down. And so we want to try to accurately diagnose that. And so, Justin, I think thanks for bringing that up, because I guess one of the first things I'm going to kick out to you guys is when you think of Western American church, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
What's the Sunday morning service?
The Sunday morning service, exactly. And what about it? What is the Sunday morning experience at a church?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the way that we're doing church, it's essentially 3 songs and a message.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But biblically, that model is nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not.
Right.
And so I want to tread a little carefully here, because it's not inherently wrong to do 3 songs and a message.
Sure. I mean, it's essentially what we do.
Right. But when your entire church stops at 3 songs and a message, a time of giving, a time of announcements,
Yeah.
and then everybody goes home, what are we left with?
Yeah.
We're left with people leaving.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about that, and like what it feels like to hear that question, is church dead, knowing full well that maybe there's something we need to change here.
Well, I think that that's the kind of the premise of this whole episode today is, we've been sort of defending this idea that church is not dead, even though there are less people here, or even though there's, just statistically speaking, there are less people showing up on a Sunday morning after post-pandemic or whatever, now that churches are largely reopened. But I think, turning this topic kind of like you were saying on its head a little bit and saying, is church dead? Maybe. Is church dying? Like, maybe. And not the church collectively as a whole, but like the way that we have been perceiving church is dying. And maybe that's like a very good thing. Pastor Matthew has talked about this a lot. Well, not a lot, but has talked about it a good bit, and saying that like we right now are in a prime, like golden age of opportunity as the church to reset and rewrite so much of what we think the church is. Because a lot of it has gotten, very similar to, what you see in, people are like this. We tie up our rituals and religiosity into what we think to be like the actual form of belief or whatever. So we think that coming to a building for 1 hour every week satisfies a requirement for us to be Christians, or for us to say that we're a part of a church, or to even have like an effect on the world or whatever, when really like that's not it. And so for me, when we're looking at this topic, like, is church dead? It's like, no, but that way of church is dying. And we're seeing that being reflected, where like it's not like maybe this idea of like, oh, it's just a church service and I go to this and then I leave. And it's just almost like this like gravitational like orbit. Like I come back in and then I'm out again, come back in and then I'm out again. Maybe like that idea of church is dying. Maybe we got to start like shifting things a little bit. Like there's 167 other hours in the week for us to be able to do something as a church, for you and me, for Justin, for Austin over there. Like we should, like, so much the percentage of our job is focused on this Sunday morning experience. And not that that's all bad. There's a lot of really, really great things about a gathering of people and all that kind of stuff. But maybe we got to shift that a little bit. And I think too, because things are changing in our lifetime, and it feels fairly accelerated right now, I feel like a lot of people are ringing alarm bells, when in reality, maybe the last 20 to 30 years have been the aberration. And like we are actually headed back to more of like what church maybe should be, or maybe what church always has been. And like maybe we have just been sort of experiencing this like bubble of prosperity or success or progress or something that like is inflated, unrealistically.
Two things. Number one, I was dancing around all of that, trying to like.
Well, sorry, I just hit it. I hit it with a hammer.
No. I don't. It's not a bad thing that I was dancing around it, because I didn't. I didn't want to just end the episode right there. but B, it's Justin's disclaimer rings true, I think, in all of these conversations. Yes, we are employed by a church, but I don't think, and you're right, Pastor Matthew is not striving to do church, and the vision of this entire church is not to do just the 1 hour on a Sunday.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The vision of this entire church is to continually reach out in the community and reach out and into the world.
Yeah.
By hook or by
crook. Go
crook.
from here.
Right.
Yeah.
It's we want to be ascending church in all facets and in all aspects. I think, to me, it feels so when you're talking about maybe it's been the wrong way, quote unquote wrong, again, treating it with kid gloves, it feels a little bit like the .com bubble, where there was an incredible expansion from 95 until 2000.
Yeah.
Of internet companies, tech companies, everything. Amazon started in 1994, and then every other company thought it was going to be Amazon and eBay and Yahoo. And then there was an incredible amount of tech companies that were formed in a very short period of time, relatively. And the bubble burst in 2000 with a number of things, but 9/11 being kind of the capper on all of it. And a bunch of people lost their jobs, and a bunch of people lost, all sorts of stuff. But in the midst of that, look at what came out of that. So yes, there was a lot of heartbreak, a lot of heartache, but there was two things that really came out of that. Number one, there was federal regulation, which churches might be more federally regulated. Excuse me. Goodness, that was a word. Regulated. But number two, there was a distillation of the core principles that were actually needed to do business on the internet, that have for lack of any other thing, have completely guided the last 20 some odd years of business in the United States and really around the world.
Sure.
And I feel like we're at that tipping point. We're at that bubble bursting point right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've been at it and we don't know how to deal with it. And then the pandemic happened, and now that 5-year period got compressed into like an 18-month period. Mm-hmm. And so now we're left holding the bag as the church going, where'd everybody go?
Yeah.
Like, how do we deal with this?
Well, I think it's super interesting. So if you think about, I think that's a good analogy, and it's obviously a much compressed, shorter business analogy than I think I almost view it as like the mega church evangelical bubble that we've been living in for the past 40 years. So like started with churches like Willow Creek back in the early 80s, late 70s kind of thing. Up until now, like think about what has happened in the last 40 years, or I guess maybe what hasn't happened. So we've had economic recessions and all that kind of stuff. We had 9/11. But in general, it has been a 40 years of relative prosperity, progress, and peace.
The three Ps.
The 3 Ps. And I am a preacher now.
Preacher of prosperity, progress, and process.
But like, think about the general line heading from because I think about, that scene in the beginning of Miracle, the hockey movie, where, you have Jimmy Carter giving this speech about how, things are terrible, things are terrible, things are terrible. And like really, the beginning of 1980s was rough. Yeah. And then Reagan came in, and I'm not getting political at all, but like economically, like the country took off. Like compared to where we were very post World War II, became industrious, suburbia like really, really grew. But from 1980 on, we saw like immense technology booms.
Globalization inside of that.
Yep, the globalization. I mean, like it's almost like we've been lying to ourselves that like we have been experiencing normal, when in reality, we are on an almost daily basis experiencing things that like humankind has never experienced before. And I was just watching a video last night about, they were talking about Starlink, which is this new thing SpaceX is doing where they're launching, dozens of satellites at a time into low Earth orbit to surround the entire globe with over 40,000 satellites. Like that's their goal, so that people can have satellite
Skynet.
Well, it's called Starlink.
I know, but
yeah,
Skynet.
Yeah. And so, like he was talking about how like, we get a really bad rap. Humans get a really bad rap because we're doing bad things with the internet or whatever. But like, maybe people need to lay off a little bit, because this technology is like 15 years old.
Yep.
And it went from like being on a place where like you have to go like a desktop to now like we're carrying around like the power of like 1,000 generations of knowledge in our pocket. And like, of course we don't know what to do with that. And so, like,
that's a good point.
Like this mega church, like churches have never been this big. Like we are at the very, very low end to be classified of what a mega church is. And I think it's like 2,000 or 2,500 on a weekend or whatever. So like we see that a weekend. And so very technically speaking, we are a mega church. But, like this polarization is happening, even though the average church in America is only like 75 people.
Yep, 77.
All of it feels like the resources, the media, whatever, like is all sort of like gravitating toward these like mega churches, where these people have giant buildings and campuses throughout, and whatever, it's these large corporations that are funded by other people's money. But then it starts to become like this sort of like bloated, large organization that when a worldwide crisis happens, for them to turn and pivot and be nimble and all that kind of stuff, it's impossible to happen, because you are dictated by how large your corporation is. And like your ministries end up being like motivated. Like it's almost like your buildings are driving your ministry rather than your ministries driving what you do in your buildings. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But it mirrors what's happening also you look at companies around the globe right now, especially in the United States. I look at, and this is not going to mean anything except like to 5 people, but Microsoft just bought Activision and Blizzard, which is one of the largest video game publishers
they're
out
giant. They're absolutely giant.
for like almost $70 billion.
Which is just mind-boggling.
But now we're reducing. That's one less video game publisher now going into Microsoft.
Yeah.
Or, there was
what's happening with like wireless networks.
I was going to say the Sprint and T-Mobile thing, which is now back. It was happening, and then it was on hold, and now it's back. And
no,
all that other stuff.
they're still under the T-Mobile umbrella. They're just still operating as Sprint.
Right.
And what's the other one? Metro PCS.
Yep.
They're T-Mobile companies, just subsidiaries.
Yep. And so that's all happening right now. And so people have been doing that with churches, and the pandemic hits, and arguably the mega church was well equipped and well set to handle it, and I would say didn't know what to do because they couldn't turn. I'm including us in that as well. We oftentimes had a tough time turning what we were doing in person and everything we were counting on with people being in a building at a certain place in a certain time without sheer elbow grease. We were hard pressed to try to turn it. And there's success stories, like the studio is a success story, and the fact that Austin's sitting there is a success story, and like everything that happened at Bay Hope Church, like arguably I think we came out pretty awesome.
I would say better than a lot of probably larger churches that are almost like now, because like I remember we saw a pastor of a local church at a restaurant during the pandemic or right before we all came back or whatever. And it was
like 2 weeks before we all came back.
Yeah. And so this pastor who knew who we were because I was wearing a Bay Hope shirt or whatever, but we were wearing a Bay Hope tags. He came back and was talking with Andy, actually. Not that he doesn't know me. I know he doesn't listen to this podcast, and he doesn't know you, but because of our church, whatever affiliation, whatever. And he was saying something to the effect of like, can't wait for us to, like finally get butts back in seats or whatever.
Yep.
And like basically this whole online thing really stinks. And he had no idea that Andy was the actual digital pastor.
Which is irony of all ironies at that point. And I was just nodding along, just like, yep,
But, like they have large buildings and they have, a lot of people, yes, that come and all that kind of stuff. But the online ministry, which is where 99.5% of people are right now.
Yep.
And if our goal is to go and make disciples, to leave and go and make disciples, isn't that a place we need to be doing it at? Because they've been doing church in a very specific way, and because, like money funds things, and, like having people in your building is like you've equated that to the presence of God and all that kind of stuff. It blinds you from being able to see maybe what like even the next step of what church ministry can look like and leverage what you have right now to be able to grow and move forward.
So we have done a lot of railing on church.
I'm not railing. I just
no. You're not railing. You're pointing out pain points. You're pointing out pressure areas right now.
When I think pin in that. I think that to bring it back to Justin's balanced appeal and that kind of thing, like Jesus, like there are a lot of scholars who say the reason Jesus railed on Pharisees so much and had such high critiques of Pharisees is because he himself was an actual Pharisee. And so, like
he knew the inside.
Yeah. And like, if you look at, I'm not equating us to Jesus or prophets, like, don't hear me say that. But I think that the people who are closest to this are like, have critiques about these kinds of things because we are so close to them. Like, this is our passion. This is our desire to see the church grow, to see the kingdom of God come nearer. And so, like these are pain points that we are experiencing.
Hallelujah. Yeah. Okay. What do we do then to fix it? Because fix it because we don't just want to identify. So the first step in fixing something is identifying the problem. But what do we do here and now? Yes, but in the future, what does it look like to help the church continue to grow? Because, like, spoiler, God's church never is dying until Jesus comes back, and then it's not dying, it's just being fulfilled. So what do we do then for our next couple of years here to help the church grow, to help people be reached, to help the kingdom advance, to help people hear the good news and glory of Jesus Christ? Like, what do we do? What's like one thing we can do?
I mean, I I think it's the principle or the idea that like church is not on Sunday morning. It is, but like it's also on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
And and Saturday. It doesn't involve you coming to a building necessarily. It does involve you gathering in some way, shape, or form, but like there's got to be different and better avenues. And like I don't think that is earth-shaking or history-breaking, paradigm-shifting kind of thing. Like that's what the church, the successful church has always done. We have fed the homeless. We have clothed the poor. You know, like we've given homes to the orphans. You know, or like we have taken care of orphans and widows. Like that's what we're supposed to be doing. And like, I don't know, I've had so many conversations about this recently with people, but like in looking back on my life and looking back on, especially in my formative years as a Christian, like I was a worship leader, so obviously involved in a lot of worship projects, but some of the times that like I felt most alive and closest to God had very little to do with actual music, had very little to do with like, yes, I remember a few worship times that felt transcendent and truly like almost heavenly, but like that pales in comparison to when I was on a mission trip in Guatemala and listening to this woman talk about her son who needs like head surgery basically and doesn't have the money to do it in a shack in Guatemala, or like when we were at a church in New Orleans cleaning up, you know, after Hurricane Katrina. Like it's those types of moments that I feel like have been so formative and fundamental to what I am doing right now. And if the only thing that we're focusing on is our gathering on Sunday morning, or just like that like the subsidiaries of like a Sunday morning gathering. So like, you know, worship music or some sort of you know, worship media, you know, some having to do with speaking or books or whatever outside of that. That's all great and necessary, but like we have to couple it with something else throughout the week, and like for a more full diet of what a Christian is actually supposed to be. And in that, we see the church grow stronger. We see Christians grow stronger. Everybody says like, oh, Gen Zers and millennials are all looking for purpose, you know, like they want to be able to like engage with something that like do something that matters with their life, you know, which I think is wonderful. And like, good gracious, cannot the church give like the most, like the best purpose and like the best thing that you can possibly do with this short time we have here on earth? Yeah,
absolutely. I love looking at, whenever this question confronts us, I love looking at a Sunday morning church experience with worship and teaching and all that other stuff, not as the beginning of, or not as the end of the week, but as the beginning of the week.
Yeah.
So it is a thing that sends you out.
Right.
It energizes you as a congregation, as a body, as a fellowship of believers, online, in person, doesn't matter. We can talk about online church next week if we want to, but it energizes you, it kind of powers you up, and then Monday to Saturday sends you out into the world to be little Jesuses. With what does Pastor Matthew say? Little Jesus with skin on? Like that's a weird saying, but like it sends you out to be.
You get to be lights in darkness.
Correct. And then on a Sunday, and so eventually you're going to pour yourself out. And if you pour yourself out enough, you're going to be empty. And then you come back on a Sunday and you get refilled by fellowship, by teaching, by music, by singing, by worship, by just the general purpose. And then you're sent out. And that's your rhythm. Your rhythm is gathering energy, sending out the energy, gathering, you know, the power of the Spirit, and then sending out the power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Instead of, we're working our entire week, I'm tired, man, I got to go do church on Sunday.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm checking that off my list. It is now the end of the week.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Well, like the last thing God wants, I mean, like I look at my kids, if my kids feel like they have to be with me, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
God does not want us to feel obligated. Like if you feel obligated to come, don't come. You know, there's a
God loves a cheerful giver, Mike.
like there's a thing, you know, commitment is that I understand there's a fine line between commitment and obligation, but there's an intent there, like committed, like I'm committed to this. I'm going to show up even when I don't feel like it.
Right.
Is different than I have to go to check off a box. You know, that is nuance there for sure. But like church should not be a place of obligation.
Right.
Should be a place of commitment.
Amen, brother. Justin, I looked down at the monitor and I saw you there looking pensively. What do you have to add to this conversation, young man?
Well, yeah, I was really just thinking about I was really thinking about like everything that Jesus was describing, just with really just all of his teachings in general, and how that is probably the best description of a church that we have, even if it's not, specifically talking about like, a church building or anything.
Yeah.
But between that and Acts and everything, we have, I feel like, a pretty good outline of what a church, should be accomplishing. And, regardless of the structure and everything. So regardless of, structure of like services or like, internal like ministries and stuff like that, I feel like it really just comes down to like, what is the church accomplishing? And if it is accomplishing everything that, Jesus described and Acts describes and everything, then I feel like that's the overall goal. Not so much the structure.
I agree.
So all that to say, like, is church dead? No. Is the way that we have been experiencing church dying?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And to bring about new life, there has to be death.
I was so hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Say that again, because you hit me with that yesterday during pre-production, and it rattled me.
Yeah, for us to experience new life and to be reborn, to experience resurrection power, like there has to be death in some way, shape, or form. And there is a lot of things we all do as a church, as Bay Hope Church even, that needs to die, that we need to sacrifice, that we need to consecrate and give up so that we can see new life and actual resurrection power come about. Not to say that we are not connecting people to Jesus, like we are. Like we hear stories about that all the time. I mean, today in staff meeting, like we heard a bunch of stories about that. Like Bay Hope Church is by far the most effective church I've ever worked with, but like I think collectively as a church, the big C capital church, especially in America, there's a lot of things that we need to put to death.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to wrap up the episode there, and hopefully we don't get fired from this one. How about you? We would love to know, what are you seeing in the modern church right now, in Western church, but also in church worldwide? What are the things that we're missing? What are our blind spots right now? Because we do want to turn this into an honest conversation and an honest dialogue. I think there's a lot there. And especially if you've generationally been with the church, or if you are conversely just coming to the church for the first time, or you don't even know Jesus, or you don't have any, or you have questions about the faith, like we'd love to have that conversation with you, just to kind of know what is going on in the world, because we do live kind of insulated worlds a little bit. I mean, we work in a church, our friends are Christians, our families are Christians. Like it's, by and large, we're kind of inside the walls of the cathedral, so to speak. And so peeking outside every once in a while, it's like, oh, this is different out here.
Yeah.
So we would love to know, but we're going to wrap up the episode here. Like I already said, thank you so much for joining us here on this episode of The Weekday. We will see you next time. We love you. Bye. Goodbye. Hey, thanks for tuning in to Bay Hope TV. Be sure to like and share these videos with your friends, as it really does help this channel out. And be sure to subscribe for more Bay Hope TV content. As always, thanks for watching.